Hi, I'm Felix, and this is the fourth video in my series Blender for graphic designers and the final one of this number 2 chapter. This last part will be focused on creating another mockup scene and doing some cool stuff with the cameras in Blender. So we now have this basic paper material set up, and now we can go ahead and go back to the layout tab to give us a little more room to work with. And now we can really start looking at how we want to build out our scene to come up with a final rendering. And I'm moving this slide closer to our mesh here to show you how you can really see what this bump node is doing. So I'm lighting it from a very flat angle, and that of course gives you a lot of little shadows and details in the material to the point where it gets really extreme. So we're not gonna go that far, and I'm gonna switch this point light to a sun because I like the look of the sunlight in Blender. I'm gonna also go ahead and rotate the card a little bit. Maybe we can put it on our background. One thing I forgot to mention about the sunlight, the direction of the sunlight is controlled by this little yellow dot that you can just click and drag around. So if you want to change the way that your sun is positioned in the virtual sky, you can just do that by using this little grab tab here. I'm also going to adjust the angle again and just look for something that looks good. You can always use these little XYZ buttons here to switch into these perspectives where you can really precisely position your objects. And I'm also going to, because I want the camera to be looking in that general direction, I'm also going to move our background back and to the left, and then set a camera angle so we can start tweaking the camera settings. And to set the camera to your current viewport angle, you can just go ahead and push Control Alt and 0, and that brings your camera right to the perspective where you had your viewport in. Okay, so now before we're gonna add more lighting, we're gonna give our background a material too. We're gonna do that by just selecting it, going to this materials tab and just creating a new material. And that way we can also control the parameters that we have talked about for our background. So I'm gonna turn up the roughness and tune the specular, but most importantly I'm gonna give it a color. Yeah, just a cool gray tone. And if you want to fine-tune your camera, again, you can open this tab here using the N button on your keyboard, and then in the View tab, setting camera to view here with this checkbox, and then you can just using the middle mouse button and the Shift key manipulate your camera and look for a good image there. And don't forget to deselect to not accidentally move your camera around. All right, so there we go. now we have a basic scene setup, and we're gonna do a quick test render to see how it might turn out. All right, and there we have it, our rendering. If we zoom in, we can really see this texture that we created that is showing up nicely in this render. I will be going ahead and adjusting the position of our card here a little bit like so. But something that is really obvious is that there is not a lot of complexity in this scene. And what we're going to do now is using a really easy trick to add a lot of depth and complexity to the scene by creating a shadow casting image. And you can pretty much use all images that have transparency in them to cast shadows. There is a really nice website that I will be linking in the description where you can get all different kinds of PNGs, so like paper cutouts of different leaves and plants and objects that you can use to cast shadows in your scene. And I'm just gonna go ahead and add some leaves to mine using the import images as planes again, and just selecting one of these PNG images. All right, and there we have it. So this is just a branch with leaves. One thing that is pretty obvious is when we start rotating it, that doesn't do what we expected it to do. So it's just showing up a rectangular shadow, which is not what we were looking or going for. And what you need to get rid of that and actually use the non-transparent parts of the image to cast a shadow is to select the material tab, and then for this shadow mode here, put that to either alpha hashed or clip. And now we do have an actual shadow that is being cast by our transparent regions in our image. And now, of course, we have to scale it appropriately to the size that we're going for. So I'm gonna make this one really big to make it believable. So being aware of scale is really important when designing render scenes. And I'm also gonna push it up quite a bit. And as you see, even though it's now above the light object, because we have selected it to be a sun, it still gets lit from the top, from the sky, so to say. So I'm just gonna go ahead and preview that. Okay, more shadow in the background. And just a little bit on our card here. Yeah. And the further you move it away from your background, the less sharp your shadows become. All right, so like that, this is gonna be the way I will leave it. I'm just gonna adjust my sun a little bit, make it bigger, to get a little bit softer shadow here, as you can see. And then we're gonna do another rendering and see how it turns out. All right, so there we have it. So as you can see, we added quite a bit of complexity and depth to our scene here. We still have our structure showing up nicely, but we do also have the added complexity of our shadows. But right now, of course, it looks really, really cool. So we're gonna go ahead and adjust the color of the sun to warm the image up a bit. And you can do that really, really subtly, so you don't need a lot of input to actually change the way that the scene is turning out, and you have to really be mindful of not introduce a weird tint to your scene. So I'm just gonna give it a very, very, very light yellow tint here. All right, and another thing that you can do to create more realistic appearances is, right now we can imagine this image being taken on a sunny day, so most likely you will have somewhat of a blue sky, and to simulate that you can use this world properties tab, and the color of the background by default is set to a dark gray, and that gives your shadows a lot of depth, but they're really, really neutral. And if you go ahead and choose a sky that is more blue, then you can, as you see, start to tint the shadows according to that surrounding, and that gives you these kind of really blue seeming shadows that you might recognize from images taken in the summer, in the summertime. And of course, again, it's about subtlety, so you don't want to overdo it, unless you do want to overdo it and really accentuate the fact that you have these cold shadows, but just find a way and a setting that you like. And you can, by adjusting the brightness of the sky, you can pretty much just adjust the brightness of your shadows. So we're gonna leave it like that and do another test rendering to see how everything turns out. All right, there we go. We see the way our shadows show up has changed dramatically. We do have the warm light on our card here, the cool shadows, and all this nice structure in the background. So the last thing we're going to take a look at for this video is some of the camera settings. And to do that, we're going to select our camera here and go into this camera properties tab. And this is where you pretty much set up your virtual camera. So you can adjust the focal length. So you can zoom in to the image, find a nice perspective that you like, and you can also do a lot of other adjustments. You can do shifting of your sensor, something that you could do with large format analog cameras, for example, but you of course have no real limits here in this environment. And then something that is also really, really interesting to use to accentuate details like the structure that we created is using this depth of field. So if we're gonna go ahead and click that, it will simulate the focal plane of a actual camera. And of course we need to tell our camera what to focus on, and the easiest way to do it is just using this little pipette tool and selecting our object, and then it just focuses on the center of the selected object. So right now you start to see it becoming blurry here. The bottom edge is pretty sharp still, but if you want to make this more extreme, you can just regulate the f-stop like you would with a analog camera. So you can just do a 1.4 for example, and get a really nice shallow depth of field. And you can even go beyond the limitations of normal cameras and use values like 0.5 or even 0.0 to get really, really extreme effects. We're not going to do that, but it can be helpful. So we're going to stick to our 1.4 here. And an alternative way to focus your camera, you can just get rid of this focus on object setting by clicking this little X button here, is going to, I'm just gonna deactivate that feature just because of the performance that I lose. You can open this viewport display tab here and show the limits. And if you then leave the camera, you get this little X here that you can also click and drag, and wherever this intersects your objects will be the focus point of your camera. So you can use that also to set the focus point. Then I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in to see if it works and check the depth of field again. Then you just have to figure out what value you want. So I want the X to be in focus like it is now, to really show our structure in our material, and I want the other parts out of focus, and this is a value that works for this scene. And with that adjustment being made, we're going to do our final render for this video. All right, and there we have it, our final render. So as you can see, our structure shows up nicely. We have this very subtle depth of field blur going on. We have our shadows in the background, and using these techniques, you can really build intricate scenes with just a few objects in your in your scene. You just need some kind of a background, something that you want to show, a good material for it, high quality textures, and then you can just add complexity by using things like the depth of field of the camera or adding shadows, working with light and the different light settings, and that already gets you pretty far. So I hope this little exercise was interesting and of value to you, and yeah, if you have any comments, any remarks you want to make, just leave a comment. I really appreciate that, and I wish you all the best for your own Blender endeavors. See you in the next video.